How could a man once saved by his wife's sacrifice turn around and humiliate her in front of everyone? Family, welcome back to Elite Romance, where real heartbreaks turn into unforgettable stories of strength, justice, and redemption. Today's story will take you on a journey through betrayal, despair, and the kind of comeback you never saw coming. You'll witness a woman who lost everything, her child, her joy, even her dignity, only to rise again with a strength that left her husband trembling with regret. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Elite Romance so you never miss our latest stories that touch hearts all around the world. And while you're here, drop a comment to let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing your voices from every corner of the globe. Stay with us until the very end, because the twist that awaits will leave you speechless. The alarm rang at 4:30 a.m., slicing through the darkness of their small apartment. Saad Ayodel pressed her palm against the metal frame of the bed, her muscles aching, her eyes burning with fatigue. Another double shift awaited her. The kitchen smelled faintly of leftover fried plantains, and the air felt heavy, like even the walls knew her exhaustion. Mark was still asleep, sprawled across the sheets, breathing evenly, untouched by the grind that consumed her every day. She bent to lace her worn sneakers, whispering to herself, "Just hold on, Saad. One more day. One more step." She looked at him once more, telling herself that everything she endured was worth it, that someday his dream of running a technology startup would pay off, and their sacrifices would no longer be invisible. By mid-morning, the fluorescent lights of the hospital carved sharp lines on her face as she moved from patient to patient. Her back ached, her legs trembled, yet she smiled, telling an elderly man, "You're safe here. Rest now." Inside, she was falling apart. The baby growing inside her was her hidden treasure, the secret she guarded with fragile hope. She pressed a hand against her belly whenever she felt a cramp and whispered silently, "Stay with me. Please stay." When the clock struck noon, she exchanged her scrub top for a faded uniform at the diner across the street. The smell of grease clung to her skin as she carried trays to tables, her body begging for rest, but her heart urging her on. Late that evening, she returned home to find Mark pacing the living room, his phone clutched tight, his face flushed with alcohol. The table was littered with empty bottles, half-written notes, and a crumpled contract proposal. He muttered, "They don't understand. They think I'm just some dreamer. But I'll show them, Saad. I'll prove them wrong." She placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Mark, please, you need to slow down. You've been drinking too much. It's not good for you." He pulled away, his voice sharp. "You don't get it. This is my shot. If I lose it, we'll stay in this hole forever." She wanted to shout, to tell him she was breaking under the weight of two jobs, that she was carrying his child, but she swallowed the words, afraid her truth would crush what little hope he had left. The following night, the phone rang just as she was stepping off her hospital shift. Mark's voice came through, ragged and panicked. "Saad, you have to come. They're throwing me out of the bar. I can't." The line went dead. Her heart leapt into her throat. She clutched her stomach, whispered, "Not now," and ran. Rain poured over the cracked sidewalks, soaking her shoes as she hurried through the night. Each step jolted her body, but the image of Mark in trouble pushed her forward. The neon lights of the bar glowed in the distance, and she heard shouting. She pushed through the crowd just as Mark stumbled outside, cursing at the bouncer. "Don't touch me. I know people who will end you." His words slurred, his hands flailing. Saad reached him, her voice trembling. "Mark, please, stop this. Let's go home." He turned, eyes wild, and for a moment didn't even recognize her. The bouncer's hands shoved against his chest, and Mark staggered backward. Saad lunged to steady him, her arms wrapping around his waist. Pain exploded in her abdomen. She gasped, clutching her belly. "No! Please, not now!" Her knees buckled, and she collapsed on the wet pavement. People shouted, someone called for help, but all she could hear was the pounding of her heart and the echo of her own prayer. "God, not again." The hospital lights blurred as they wheeled her in. Mark followed, his face pale, his hands shaking. He tried to grab her hand. "Hold on, Saad, please, hold on." She turned her head weakly, her lips trembling. "Our baby! Save our baby!" Doctors rushed her into surgery, their voices clipped, urgent. Hours passed like years for Mark, who sat with his face buried in his palms. When the doctor emerged, the silence in the hallway was louder than words. "I'm sorry," the doctor said softly. "She lost the baby. Her body couldn't handle the stress." Mark's breath caught in his throat. "Stress? She never told me." The doctor's eyes held pity. "She was working herself beyond her limits. I warned her. She didn't rest. Her body gave out." Inside the recovery room, Sade lay pale and trembling. Her eyes fluttered open as Mark entered. She turned her face away, tears soaking her pillow. Her voice was a broken whisper. "It's my fault. I should have stopped. I should have told you." Mark gripped her hand, his own tears spilling. "No, don't say that. I should have seen it. I should have protected you." She shook her head, her body racked with sobs. "I killed our baby. I killed—" He pressed his forehead against hers, desperate. "Don't. Don't ever say that. God knows why this happened. We'll carry this pain together." For the first time in weeks, his voice was gentle, yet the weight of guilt pressed down on them both like a stone they could not lift. 2 days later, they returned to the apartment. The room felt emptier than ever. Mark tried to smile as he pulled her chair out. "From now on, no more work for you. I'll take care of us." His voice wavered, unsure of his own promise. Sade stared at the peeling wallpaper, her heart heavy. The child she had dreamed of cradling was gone, leaving only silence. She tried to smile, but it broke into tears. In that moment, the air in the room seemed colder, the distance between them wider than the narrow walls of their home. She whispered, almost to herself, "I wanted to be strong. I thought I could carry us both. But I lost everything." Mark reached for her hand again, but deep inside, Sade already felt a chasm opening between them. She had given everything, her body, her strength, her hope. Yet all she held now was emptiness. The apartment echoed with silence, and in that silence the seeds of a storm began to grow. The weeks that followed the miscarriage blurred into a haze. Sade sat by the window most evenings, staring at the cracked pavement outside, her hands folded across her lap as if holding a child who was no longer there. The neighbors' voices carried through the thin walls, their laughter sharp, their whispers sharper. She heard them say she was wasting away, that she had let herself go. She pressed her palms over her ears, but the words still burned. Food became her shield. The taste of sweet bread or fried chicken was the only thing that silenced the storm in her chest. Each bite was a desperate attempt to fill the emptiness inside, but every pound added to her body only deepened her shame. Mark noticed, but instead of compassion, his eyes hardened. He came home one evening, his tie loosened, his shirt carrying the smell of whiskey. He looked at her and snapped, "Do you even care about yourself anymore? Look at you," sighed. "You're not the woman I married." His words struck harder than any blow. She set down the fork, her throat tightening. "I'm trying, Mark. You don't understand what I'm carrying." He laughed without humor, shaking his head. "What are you carrying? I'm the one out there fighting to build something. You can't even bother to stay presentable." He walked into the bedroom, leaving her staring at the empty plate in front of her, the taste of food suddenly turning bitter. She curled into herself on the sofa, whispering, "If only you knew. If only you saw me." The silence of the apartment pressed in, suffocating, until she thought she might scream. One night, Mark returned with news. His company had secured a meeting with potential investors. He strutted around the living room, excitement burning in his eyes. "This is it, Sade. If I land this, everything changes. We'll move out of here. We'll be someone." She wanted to believe him, wanted to hold on to the hope that all her sacrifices were not in vain. When he said, "You're coming with me, right? You'll be at the dinner," she hesitated. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, at the extra weight, the tired eyes, the lines of sorrow etched into her face. But his expectation was clear, and she whispered, "Yes, I'll be there." The night of the dinner, she dressed in her best dress, though it no longer fit as it once had. She pressed the fabric smooth, painted her lips with trembling hands, and told herself she would smile. The restaurant gleamed with chandeliers, polished marble floors, and the low hum of conversation. Men in tailored suits and women in glittering gowns filled the space, their laughter echoing against the high ceilings. Saad followed Mark through the crowd, her pulse pounding in her ears. He walked tall, greeting people with practiced confidence, but when she tried to step beside him, he edged away, as if embarrassed to be seen with her. At the long mahogany table, investors leaned forward, glasses of wine in hand, waiting for Mark to present his vision. One man glanced at Saad, then at Mark, and asked lightly, "And this is?" Mark's jaw tightened. His eyes flickered toward her, then away. "She's a friend," he muttered. The words slammed into her chest. She forced a smile, but her insides twisted. She opened her mouth to speak, to remind him of her name, her place, her sacrifices, but his hand pressed against her chair, silencing her. "Why don't you wait by the bar, Said? I don't want you to be bored." Her breath caught. She felt every eye on her as she stood, her legs trembling. She heard the faint chuckle of a woman across the table, saw the smirk of another man, and realized this was no mistake. Mark wanted her invisible. She walked to the bar, her head bowed, the sound of laughter chasing her steps. She sat on the edge of the stool, the smell of polished wood and strong liquor filling her senses. The bartender offered her a glass of water, and she gripped it tightly, wishing it could wash away the humiliation burning her cheeks. From her seat, she watched Mark lean forward, speaking with energy, his hands painting pictures of a future he claimed to be building. The investors nodded, intrigued, impressed, but not one of them glanced her way again. She realized in that moment that her existence, her sacrifices, her pain, had been erased from his narrative. She was not his wife tonight, not his partner, not even his support. She was nothing more than a shadow he wanted to disappear. Her chest heaved, tears stinging her eyes, but she forced herself to stay still, to not give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. When the dinner ended, Mark approached her with a triumphant grin. "They loved me. This could be the turning point." She stared at him, her voice barely steady. "You called me a friend, in front of everyone." His smile faltered. "Don't make this about you, Said. Tonight was about business. I couldn't risk them thinking I was weighed down." Her voice rose, sharp with pain. "Weighed down? I carried this family when you had nothing. I bled for us, I lost for us, and now I am too heavy for you to claim?" People glanced their way as they passed, curiosity in their eyes. Mark hissed, "Lower your voice. You're embarrassing me." She stepped back, her hands shaking. "No, Mark, you embarrassed me." She turned and walked out into the night, the cool air hitting her like ice, her breath ragged as she stumbled down the street. The city lights blurred through her tears. Her chest ached with every step, the memory of his dismissal echoing in her ears. She pressed her hands against her stomach, the phantom weight of the child she had lost returning with brutal force. "What am I now?" she whispered to the night. The answer did not come. Only the sound of her sobs was carried away by the wind. Then from behind, a familiar voice called gently, "Said?" She froze. Turning, she saw Pastor Elijah standing under the glow of a street lamp, his kind eyes filled with recognition and concern. He had aged, lines marking his face, but his presence radiated calm strength. "Is it really you?" he asked, stepping closer. She covered her face with her hands, ashamed. "I can't do this anymore. He made me feel invisible." Elijah's voice was firm yet warm. "You are not invisible, Said. You've simply forgotten how much light you carry. Let me help you find it again." In that moment, something inside her cracked, not from weakness, but from the release of holding too much alone. She lowered her hands, tears streaming freely. The humiliation still burned. The despair still weighed heavily. But Elijah's presence planted the first fragile seed of hope. She nodded slowly, whispering, "Please, help me stand again." The community center smelled faintly of fresh paint and coffee. Saad stepped inside, her arms wrapped around her chest, her eyes flickering nervously from wall to wall. Posters of smiling women decorated the hallway, their captions filled with words like resilience, strength, and hope. She felt out of place, like an intruder among stories brighter than her own. Pastor Elijah walked beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "This is where broken wings learn to fly again," he said. She wanted to believe him, but the weight of humiliation still pressed her down. Women in modest dresses greeted her warmly, their voices gentle, but she avoided their eyes, afraid they would see through her fragile composure. In a small room lined with chairs, a circle of women shared their stories. One spoke about leaving an abusive marriage. Another described losing a child. Each confession hung heavy in the air, yet their voices carried a quiet strength. When it was her turn, Saad's throat tightened. She lowered her gaze, whispering, "I lost my baby, and I lost myself." Her voice cracked, but Elijah nodded encouragingly. "You spoke the truth, Saad. That is the first step." The women reached out, touching her hands, their empathy surrounding her like a cloak. For the first time in months, she did not feel alone. Days turned into weeks, and Elijah encouraged her to rebuild piece by piece. He brought her into the center's kitchen, filled with the smell of herbs and simmering vegetables. "Food can heal or harm," he told her, showing her how to prepare balanced meals. She chopped carrots slowly, the knife trembling in her hand. But as steam rose from the pot, she felt a strange sense of control returning. She whispered, "Maybe I can change." Elijah smiled. "Not maybe, Said. You will." Each meal she cooked, each step she took away from heavy plates toward nourishment, became an act of defiance against despair. Exercise followed. The first morning she stepped onto the track behind the center. The cold air bit at her lungs. Her legs burned after only a few strides, sweat pouring down her back. She wanted to stop, to collapse, but Elijah's voice carried across the field. "One more step. That's all you need to do today." She gritted her teeth, muttering to herself, "One more step." The rhythm of her feet echoed like a heartbeat, shaky but alive. By the end of the week, her body ached in ways she had never known, yet each ache felt like proof that she was moving forward. Music returned last. The church choir rehearsed every Saturday, their voices filling the sanctuary with hymns. Elijah guided her to the pews, whispering, "Sing, Saad. Let your soul breathe again." She hesitated, staring at the hymn book in her trembling hands. The notes swam before her eyes. When she finally opened her mouth, her voice came out thin, cracked. The women around her smiled, harmonizing gently, carrying her until she found her tone. But during her first solo practice, the congregation stared, whispers rising. She froze, her chest tightening. Her voice died, leaving silence so heavy she wanted to run. She gripped the microphone, shaking. "I can't do this. They're all judging me." Elijah stepped forward, his voice firm. "They don't judge, Said. They listen. Give them the truth of your pain. That is your gift." Tears blurred her vision, but she lifted her head. The memory of Mark's cold dismissal flashed in her mind, his words calling her a burden. She clenched the microphone tighter. With a deep breath, she began again, her voice raw but strong, rising above the whispers. The notes cut through the silence, trembling with sorrow yet soaring with defiance. The congregation leaned forward, their expressions shifting from doubt to awe. By the final line, her voice filled the church, echoing through the rafters. When the last note faded, the room erupted into applause, some standing, some wiping their eyes. Said lowered her head, tears rolling freely. But these tears felt different, cleansing, not crushing. Elijah smiled from the front row, whispering, "You found your voice." In the weeks that followed, her reflection began to change. The heavy lines on her face softened, her body grew stronger, her eyes brighter. Each morning, she dressed with intention, choosing colors that once felt too bold. She walked through the community center halls with her head lifted, greeting others instead of hiding. Women began approaching her for encouragement, asking, "How did you start again?" She told them quietly, "By believing the pain wasn't the end." With each conversation, she felt the shift inside her grow, transforming from a broken woman into a beacon others could lean on. One evening, after a particularly grueling choir practice, she collapsed onto the church steps, sweat still clinging to her skin. Elijah joined her, handing her a bottle of water. "You've come far," he said. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "I thought I would drown in my grief, but now I can breathe." He looked at her carefully, his voice calm but serious. "This is only the beginning. There will be trials ahead. People from your past will test you, but remember you have already survived the fire." She closed her eyes, whispering, "Then let them come. I won't be the same woman who once bowed her head in shame." That night, alone in her room, she stood before the mirror. The woman looking back was no longer broken, invisible. She touched the glass, her hand steady. "I am here," she whispered, "and I am enough." For the first time, she believed it. The echoes of humiliation still lingered, but they no longer defined her. Instead, her scars became symbols of survival. As the moonlight spilled across the floor, she felt an unshakable truth settle in her chest. Her journey of rebirth had begun, and nothing would take it from her again. The city hall was alive with music and chatter, its grand atrium filled with shimmering lights and rows of chairs draped in white. Sad stood backstage, adjusting the folds of her golden gown, the satin catching every beam of light. Her pulse hammered, not from fear but from anticipation. This was the night of the annual community celebration, where leaders and entrepreneurs gathered to honor those who had transformed lives. Pastor Elijah stood beside her, his hand steady on her shoulder. "Tonight, the world sees what I've known all along. You are a voice of hope." She nodded, her chest rising with resolve. She had survived storms that once threatened to drown her, and now she was here not just as a survivor, but as a leader. As she stepped onto the stage, applause erupted. Her name rang across the hall, introduced as the co-founder of the Women's Renewal Fund, a project dedicated to helping vulnerable women reclaim their lives. She bowed her head slightly, humbled yet proud. The crowd's faces blurred together, but one face froze her breath. At the edge of the hall, Mark sat slumped, his suit wrinkled, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He looked nothing like the man who once boasted at investor dinners. His gaze locked on her, and for a moment he seemed unsure if the radiant woman before him was truly the wife he had discarded. After the ceremony, he found her near the fountain in the atrium. The water shimmered under the lights as he approached, his steps hesitant. "Sade," he whispered, almost reverent. She turned slowly, her posture straight, her eyes calm. "What do you want, Mark?" He swallowed hard, his voice rough. "I've lost everything. The company collapsed. The investors pulled out. Jennifer's gone. I see now what I threw away. You were my anchor, and I broke it. Please, forgive me. I need you." Her jaw tightened, the memories flashing, his laughter at her pain, his denial at that dinner, his cruelty that cut deeper than any wound. She met his gaze, her voice steady. "You called me a burden. You erased me in front of strangers. You left me bleeding in silence. Forgiveness isn't a ticket back into my life. It is freedom from my heart." His eyes glistened, and he reached for her hand, but she stepped back. "I forgive you, Mark, but understand this. I will never belong to you again." His shoulders sagged, and for a moment he looked like a man stripped bare, his pride shattered. "So this is it?" he asked quietly. Sade's eyes softened, but her tone remained unyielding. "This is justice, not revenge. I found my worth, and it does not depend on you." With those words, she turned away, leaving him standing by the fountain, the sound of water echoing like judgment in the hollow silence he carried. Later that night, the choir gathered for the final performance of the celebration. The hall dimmed, the spotlight falling on Sad as she stepped forward. She gripped the microphone, the weight of the past pressing behind her, yet no longer holding her down. She spoke, her voice carrying through the stillness. "There was a time I believed my pain defined me. I thought loss had stolen my song. But tonight, I sing not for sorrow, but for every woman who thought she was invisible. We are not shadows. We are light." The music swelled, and her voice soared, strong and unbroken. The choir harmonized behind her, the sound rising like a tide, washing over the audience. People stood, tears streaming, hands raised. Pastor Elijah closed his eyes, his lips moving in silent prayer. Mark watched from the corner, his heart sinking with every note, realizing too late that the woman he had mocked had become untouchable. She no longer looked back. She sang for herself, for the women around her, for the God who carried her through the fire. When the last note hung in the air, the hall erupted in thunderous applause. Sad's chest heaved, her eyes glistening, but her smile was radiant. She reached out, taking the hands of the women who had walked with her through the community program, pulling them forward to stand beside her. Together they bowed, their unity shining brighter than any spotlight. In that moment, Sadie knew she had not only reclaimed her life, but had become a vessel of hope for countless others. Outside, the night was cool, the stars scattered like diamonds across the sky. Sade stepped into the open air, her gown swaying with each stride. Elijah joined her, his voice quiet. "You closed one chapter tonight. What do you feel?" She lifted her face to the sky, inhaling deeply. "I feel free," she said. "For the first time, I am not carrying shame. I am carrying purpose." He nodded, his eyes proud. "Then walk in it, Sade. The world is waiting." She smiled, her heart steady, her path clear. The pain had not vanished, but it no longer ruled her. She had turned it into power, and with that power, she would light the way for others. And that brings us to the end of Sade's journey, one of heartbreak, resilience, and the power of reclaiming your voice. What about you? Which moment in her story touched you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your reflections and experiences. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to subscribe to Elite Romance so you'll never miss the next tale of courage and redemption. Thank you for spending your time with us today, and until we meet again, stay strong, stay hopeful, and keep believing in the power of love and faith.